All right then, so now let's start working on the file handling, the exception handling concepts. So over here, so we are going to discuss about the concept called exception handling. So basically the exception handling is used to handle the runtime errors. So to handle the runtime exceptions, to handle the runtime errors, we use the exception handling. So that's the reason we use the exception handling. We do have try, except, else, and finally. So these are the different keywords that we do have. So basically try block is used to handle the error codes, and this except block is to handle the error which is raised, handle the raised error from the try block, and else executed only if try was successful, and finally executed every single time, even if the error occurred or not. It doesn't matter, it will always execute. The finally statement will get executed. So let's try to understand over here. So what happens when you're trying to divide a number by using 0? So let's say print formatted string answer colon. Let's try to divide the 5 by 0. So see what's happening. So Control J, clear Python app.py. You can see division by 0. It's raising an error, division by 0. Basically, it's handling it inbuiltly, but it's showing this issue like it's a traceback error. We are not supposed to get the traceback error, right? So let's say instead of doing this, I'm going to wrap this inside the try block, try. Then I'm going to get the except block, and you can specify the error directly by yourself, like 0 division error as E. You can create an object for that 0 division error. Then you can print that traceback error over here for F. Exception occurred in, you can print that object E over here, something like this, right? So let's say clear, run it, and you can see exception occurred. And what is the exact exception? Division by 0. This is the custom message that you can display only if you know what kind of exception it's triggered. If you don't know, if the 0 division error is not triggered, then you need to handle the error by yourself. So I'm going to create one more except, and I'm going to say exception, and I'm going to use that exception. Basically, exception is the base class for all kind of error which being triggered by the Python. So if you are going to use the exception, it's better to use the custom error at the top and use the base class at the bottoms. Don't give the base class at the top, and don't use the custom division error at the bottom, right? Because this is the base. So this should always comes at the bottom, right? All right. So now if I run this, you can see still it's giving us the division by 0 error only. So right. So let's say if I'm not handling this, and if I'm using custom base class, exception occurred using by base class or something, I'm using this. If I run this, now you can see exception occurred using by base class, still it's handling the same error. So if you know exactly what kind of error that we are working on, so it's better to use that error. So to know much more about this Python exceptions and errors and everything, you can use the official documentation, search for Python exceptions handling. So you can see the official documentations, errors and exceptions in Python 3.12.1 documentations. So there you can see all the necessary errors and list of errors and everything, how to handle them and how to use those base classes and everything. You can learn much more in their documentation itself, right? It's better to go through their documentation to understand much more about the else. So think about it right now. I'm going to use the else, open it. So print the result. So I'm going to store this result over here. So initially the result is going to be 0, and I'm going to calculate eval input, enter the value for A and B. Let's store those in the necessary variables A comma B. All right, so now I'm just trying to do the calculation result equals to a slash b. We are trying to divide it. If everything is working fine, if there is no issues over here, then the else block is being triggered and the result will be calculated and stored over there. Then we can able to see display the result over here. And I'm going to use the finally also, and here I'm just going to say print finally, just finally triggered. Maximum we use this finally in the for when you're working with files or database connections, we use the finally block whether the error occurred or whether the error doesn't occur. We need to close that connection, right? So always the closing connection will be written inside the finally block. So now if I run this coding, so clear, if I run this, you can see it's asking the a and value 5 comma 0, enter, and you can see exception occurred, division by 0 finally triggered. And now if I'm giving 5 comma 5, and you can see the result is 1.0 finally triggered. If you notice that even the error is occurring, the result else block is not working, and the finally still it's working, right? You can see finally triggered. But if there is no error, the result is executed. That means the else block is executed, which means if the try is successful, then the else block is executed, but still the finally block is executed. So this is all about your exception handling, and this is how you need to use your try and excepts and the else and finally blocks. Okay, then the next we have to discuss is the file handling, how to use this exception handling in the files to handle the files and store your data, everything permanently in your local file. All right.